Assalamu alaikum. I'm Dr. Mufarra. Today I'm presenting metabolic evaluation and pharmacological treatment of urolithiasis. Introduction. Metabolic evaluation and medical management of kidney stone disease varies widely based on several patient and practitioner related factors. That's why a systemic review of the literature was performed to identify studies. A systemic review of literature was performed to identify the studies of metabolic evaluation and follow-up of patient with nephrolithiasis. The purpose of this study was to provide a guideline for appropriate evaluation and follow-up of stone formers based on metabolic stone activity. As there was limited prospective trials, so well-performed retrospective series were included in this study. Before defining the stone formers, to investigate the high-risk group, I defined the single versus recurrent stone formers. A single stone former is a patient who seeks advice for a single solitary kidney stone episode or single kidney stone. And the recurrent stone former is a patient who with multiple kidney stones that these stones can occur synchronously, multiple stones at first presentation or at different times, that is recurrent stones. Patients who form stones at an interval greater than 5 years apart fall into a gray zone coined by some authors as occasional or episodic stone formers. Two retrospective studies from the early 1980s and other more recent data suggested metabolic abnormalities were as common as in first time single stone formers as they were in patients with recurrent nephrolithiasis. Another study by Kamdar et al. Suggests focusing research more on first time stone formers rather than those with recurrent nephrolithiasis, since the solitary stone former with occasional relapses uses 80% of healthcare sources. But Rural all evaluated 2,000 to 39 first-time adult kidney stone formers and observed that the rate of recurrence based on the observation in 707 individuals after 2 year, 5 year, 10 and 15 years were 11%, 20%, 31% and 39% respectively. They identified the risk factors for recurrence was younger age, male sex, white race, family history of stones, prior asymptomatic or non-obstructing stones on imaging, and symptomatic renal pelvic or lower pole stone on imaging, gross hematuria, uric acid stone composition. Aside from recurrence, another option is to distinguish between stone formers who are metabolically active versus who are metabolically inactive. Metabolic active stone formers had new stone formation or stone growth on serial imaging, whereas the metabolically inactive stone former has no apparent stone activity on follow-up imaging. Targeted therapy in metabolically active stone former has been demonstrated to significantly decrease stone formation risk. Now, the indication for metabolic evaluation and medical management. There is a group of experts who believe that both recurrent and first-time stone formers should be evaluated metabolically and offer follow-up and metabolically targeted treatment, while others suggest that the need of metabolic evaluation should be based on the patient risk factors for recurrent stone formers. The risk factors include but are not limited to uric acid and cystine stone formers, patient with recurrent multiple stones, family history of stones, children with calcium stones, stone formation in a solitary kidney, and patient with concurrent medical conditions like nephrocalcinosis, CKD, bone disease, or those with a history of bowel disease and bowel surgery. Relative indication for a complete metabolic evaluation include those patients with whose job requires to be without stones, that is pilot, frequent business travelers, patient with stones difficult to treat. In case of urinary tract abnormalities and reconstructive surgeries, and the individuals who are immunocompromised. Performing the metabolic evaluation. AUA recommends that all patients with nephrolithiasis receive a screening evaluation which includes a medical and dietary history, serum chemistries, urine analysis, and intact parathyroid hormone level if primary hyperparathyroidism is suspected. The full metabolic evaluation for a baseline metabolic profile should be obtained at least 3 to 4 weeks after the last stone passage or treatment. The patient undergoing metabolic evaluation should have an unobstructed urinary tract, eating their regular diet and without urinary tract infection.
This is a previous slide is very important. There is a medical and dietary history, and then serum chemistries, and urine analysis, and intact parathyroid hormone. Why we focus that serum calcium and uric acid should be done in every stone patient is because of these reasons. How will you pick parathyroid abnormality or primary hyperparathyroidism if you don't have calcium? Uric acid, if you don't have a serum uric acid. So whenever you see a stone patient anywhere, you have to get his serum calcium and uric acid from exam point of view, from management point of view as well. And there is another point in this that the metabolic profile should be done after 3 to 4 weeks. Any idea why? G. There's a question that why metabolic evaluation should be done 3 to 4 weeks after stone passage. Have you read this in the guidelines or any book that it should be done? Do you agree with the statement or not, first of all?
Sir, what I read is that patient should be done when patient should of 2 weeks after patient is stone free. Like I don't exactly.
Why not when the stone is present over there? This is the why we are sitting over here is because of metabolic evaluation.
Exactly.
And there is a lot of controversy since I read the books while being a resident to date that how many 24-hour urine metabolic study should be done in a patient. 1, 2, 3. People are saying that it should be done every 6 months. People say that it should be done annually. So there is no straight consensus over it. The main reason behind is that when that stone is present over there, it can change the metabolic problems over there. There can be superimposed infection. There can be a lot of things going on. So it can alter that report. And that is why whenever we talk about 24-hour metabolic study, we talk about on calcium diet, without calcium diet, regular diet, after the stone diet. So these things have got their own value. You should be knowing it that when to get what done.
4 millimeter stones in the kidney, number 1. Number 2, then we are leaving the patients with residual stone, like very small stone and not going by ESWS, 3 and 4 ESWLs, and then we give up break. उधर भी फिर हमको ये कराना चाहिए कि आपने हम छोड़ रहे हैं तो कौन सी डाइट पे रखें. वहाँ पे तो स्टोन पैसेज नहीं होगा. 3 millimeter और 4 millimeter ये बहुत आते हैं हमारे पास.
What we need to get done is that we need to take a proper history of the patient, that he has got stones before or not, he has got family history or not, and then we have to get that patient's serum calcium and uric acid, which we don't get done. You will agree with me. So that should be a routine examination that will give you some hint that what is going on. And in these patients, after giving diet and all these things, citrate and all, and the stone is not resolving or not coming out, then to dissolve that stone, you can get that 24-hour metabolic study in that with the stone present. That is an exception. But these are exceptions. These are not 100% results. But if you talk about how to treat those 4 mm or 5 mm stones, is there are 2 school of thoughts. One say that there should not be any stone in the kidney because that stone is a nidus. If you leave that over there, there will be a stone formation over it or size will increase. And when the size increases, then you manage. This is one school of thought. The other school of thought says that leave that stone. Let's see when the size increases. Okay. But what can be done for these ESWL refractory stones and small stones that you do RIRS, retrograde intrarenal surgery? You go inside the kidney, you find the stone, you fragment it, take that stone with a basket and send it for analysis. So that will help the cause. Another thing we are missing, I'm sorry I'm going off topic, that when we ask the patient to get an ESWL done, we won't get the stone analysis of that patient. So you should ask that patient to perform that urine in a jar or channi or something, that we have that stone. I was attending a webinar few days back, Dr. Mahesh Desai, undoubted king of stone from India, was at that webinar, and he said that whenever I fragment stones with RIRS and lasers and everything, I take out all those stones with basket, and then when I take those stones with basket, he has got different channis. Okay, so from 1 centimeter stone can pass, from 3 mm stone can pass, from 5 mm stones can pass, and then he separates all those stones and see that how much fragmentation I have done and how many stones of which size I have got. So you have to be enthusiastic to remove to know that, but we are lacking RIRS and basket use, because whenever we are performing URS or laser, we are not getting the stone analysis of that patient, but they take the stone with them for the basket, and then they analyze the stone. You continue.
Metabolic evaluation is as very important, but the patient
Mic
should
on.
be advised to have a regular diet. So usually what the patient usually when we advise the patient that for a 24-hour metabolic study, the patient usually change the diet for the sake of that the test is being done and they are collecting urine for some test, and they usually take more water, they decrease the oxalate diet, so this result will alter. So the diet is very important, that the patient should be advised to take the regular diet which was taking before the collection of urine for a 24-hour metabolic study.
And that is the reason why a lot of people who don't have money constraints, they get two metabolic studies done, one on diet and one on normal, that they get a true report that what is going on, what is the difference between both of them. जी मैडम बताएंगी आपको.
Simplified metabolic evaluation. Simplified metabolic evaluation would be appropriate for the metabolically inactive patient with a single stone who is at lower risk of recurrence. The first time adult calcium stone former without a family history of stones or any obvious metabolic abnormality may be the patient who can avoid a comprehensive metabolic workup. In many cases, these individuals may remain metabolically inactive if managed by fluid therapy alone. The evaluation include a detailed history and physical examination to assess for stone forming risk factors, including a detailed review of fluid intake, diet, and medications. Lab evaluation should be performed to help determine the cause of the stone disease, the existence of comorbidities at the CKD, and dictate medical therapy. These studies should include serum ionized calcium and phosphate to evaluate primary hyperparathyroidism, serum creatinine to evaluate renal function, serum electrolytes and bicarbonate as well, 12-hour fasting urinary pH to evaluate for distal renal tubular acidosis, serum uric acid to evaluate for gout, and 24-hour urinary pH for hyperuricosuric calcium oxalate urolithiasis. A urine analysis should be performed to examine for stone crystals that could indicate stone type, assess urine pH, and for signs of infection. A thorough review of imaging studies.
Last time also we discussed that urine analysis, urine DR is a very important thing. Whenever you see that urine DR, check that pH, check specific gravity of that patient, check that are there any crystals or not, and you need to evaluate everything from that urine DR report. Make it a habit. And once you start making that habit, you won't forget that in which stones there is low pH, which stones there is high pH, and then you can diagnose things on that urine DR only.
Thorough review of imaging studies, particularly abdominal X-ray examination, can determine the stone burden and may reveal a stone type. For example, nephrocalcinosis may portend renal tubular acidosis. Radiolucent stone may be constituted for uric acid and cysteine, while staghorn stone often are composed of steroid and associated with infection. Stone analysis has a limited but potentially significant role in simplified evaluation of the low-risk stone formers. Patient with non-calcium stone had a metabolic diagnosis reflecting their specific metabolic disorder. Patient with calcium stones, however, had heterogeneous metabolic disorders. The exception was the calcium phosphate stone former, who had a significant likelihood of having renal tubular acidosis or primary hyperparathyroidism. Stone analysis alone may provide guidance for therapeutic treatment and obviate the need of formal metabolic evaluation, especially in those with non-calcium oxalate stones. Now, the comprehensive metabolic evaluation. Comprehensive metabolic evaluation consists of simplified metabolic evaluation in addition to 24-hour urine collection that allow for targeted therapy. Chandok evaluated the cost effectiveness of medical management of stone disease as compared to the surgical treatment and determined that the medical management of first stone episode may not be cost effective for some patients. Therefore, comprehensive evaluation should not be undertaken in all stone forming patients. But finding showed a significant decrease in a stone formation after lithotripsy for patients that put on targeting medical therapy, including urinary alkalizing agent, for example, potassium citrate, thiazide diuretics, or other disease-specific medications. And they found that stone formation rate decreased from 0.67 to 0 per patient per year in patients who were stone-free after the procedure, and decreased from 2.47 to 0 stone per patient per year for the patient with residual stone fragments. Specific dietary therapy adjusted according to comprehensive metabolic evaluation is more effective than the general dietary recommendation in preventing formation of a second stone. 1 versus 24-hour urine collections. Multiple studies have been done to identify the 1 versus 2 24-hour urine collection, which one is better. And one found that the 24-hour urine collection 3 days apart that showed no changes in metabolic activity, metabolic abnormality. And the other study, which done 24-hour urine collection 10 days apart, that showed there was significant change. The one show the metabolic abnormality or the other show the metabolic abnormality. So they recommend that the 24-hour urine studies on a random diet should be collected on 2 non-consecutive days to complete a comprehensive metabolic evaluation for both recurrent stone formers and single stone formers at high risk of recurrence.
When will you perform those 2? After how many days? 1 day, 2 day, 3 days? That is mentioned in books as well this is mentioned in the guidelines as well. जी
Yes.
जो आपने पढ़ा है वो बताते हैं.
After the primary study which we have done for the metabolic evaluation, and whatever intervention we have made, like we have advice from urine alkalization or things like this, we have to repeat a study after 6 weeks, and then when to see the parameters. If they are all right, then we have to repeat yearly studies. So I didn't read what is the time.
It is recommended that it should be done within 5 days. There is a lot of controversy regarding getting it done on 2nd day, 4th day, 5th day. So we are doing what the others are doing. So, but people, the Goras, are very curious about it. They have done studies on comparison of this as well. That they did it on the 2nd day, they did it on the 5th day, they did it on the 10th day, and then they discussed. So a consensus was made that 5th day is a better day, that it should be done. G, do you agree? Yes, it can be, but they say that if you are getting done after 5 days, there can be a big alteration that maybe he has changed his diet. So that 5th day will give a better idea about that report.
The more important thing is complete sample. The problem here we are facing it most of the time. Like they in 24-hour metabolic study, they don't even mention that the sample was complete or not. Unlike the one we are getting for the creatinine clearance, because creatinine is a marker who will decide that sample was complete or not. I guess
actually we have to counsel the patient. We have to take the patient on board. Yesterday we saw a patient that had something coming out of the wound, nephrocutaneous fistula. Okay. And he was admitted because of that fistula and infected wound 3 years after that nephrectomy. Okay, and then Professor Murli took his history and asked him 10 times what happened, and then he eventually said, जब मेरा पेशाब बंद होता है तो यहाँ से कुछ पानी आता है. So what comes in your mind that he has got a ureter which is the proximal end is open, I guess, and there is a nephrocutaneous fistula. So we have to take a good history. We have to explain the patient. जी आपने इस तरह से इस सैंपल को जमा करना है. He is a layman and most of them are uneducated as well. So you have to make them understand that कैसे जमा करना है. If you explain somebody कैसे जमा करना है तो ऐसा नहीं होगा कि वो जानबूझ के गलत जमा करेगा. He will. So you have to explain them as well. You have to counsel. This is very important and you have to get it done. जी madam.
Now the follow-up. AUA medical stone guidelines suggest that another 24-hour urine should be repeated after an initial evaluation after 3 to 4 months on selective medical therapy and within the 6 months from the beginning of the treatment to assess response to dietary or medical therapy and monitor for adverse effects. Follow-up thereafter can be yearly. Follow-up imaging studies. Choosing the best imaging procedure for follow-up must take into account specificity and sensitivity, cost, dose of radiation, availability of the service, risk of contrast, and in some cases the need to assess other non-stone conditions with the same modality. So this study recommends imaging study should be typically performed every 1 to 2 years, though the timing and type of imaging can be tailored based on the stone activity, clinical signs and symptoms, and stone location. Like ultrasound is readily available and can be helpful to identify the radiolucent stones. X-ray KUV for ureteral stones. And CT, non-contrast CT is the gold standard, but it has high dose of radiation and also increase the cost. Aside from the kidney stone passage itself, imaging is the most sensitive way to gauge metabolic stone activity. Now
a
there
lot
is
of
a
people
new
ask that why we don't get a CT urogram done in a PCNL patient, which is highly recommended. So what is your reply to it? Except Shoy, anybody can comment on it. Why we don't get a CT urogram in every patient?
Because we are doing retrograde in every patient also.
Everyone is doing retrograde. जी शकील आप बोलें.
Sir, we usually don't do this, maybe because most of the times we usually see only stone in the kidney, there is no hydronephrosis or other cause of obstruction or something. And we, during para, we usually do retrograde and retrograde study to see any obstruction or something
The
else.
main reason behind is only one,
This contrast
the
is-
cost-effective issues, nothing else.
And-
Because if you are going for a war, then you should be you have to make a plan pre-operatively. And whenever you see a stone, you don't just go iski SW iski. You have to make a plan. Over there in the clinic, you have to virtually go to the theater that I'll perform a puncture like this and I'll fragment the stone like this. On that CT KUB, it is quite difficult to get it done. So whenever we get a CT KUB done and there is a complex stone and we say that iska urogram hona chahiye, maybe it is a solitary kidney or complex stone, so the residents get astonished that KUB to hua hua, aap urogram kyun kara rahe hain? In a few cases, we have to get that done. So don't feel shy. Yes, there is radiation. Yes, there are multiple issues, but in few cases you have to do that. There was a study from Pakistan in which they said that that was a pediatric study. So they performed ultrasound, X-ray KUB, and performed a PCNL on that. That we'll see on the retrograde images what can be done. And that study was converted to adult study as well later. And what I believe is then that when the IVP era is declining, then we have to focus on the retrograde study that gives you a correct idea. Once we saw a CT scan of a patient, very simple stone, 2 centimeter. When we performed a retrograde study, it was a bifid system, and that stone was lying in the upper moiety of that kidney. So you have to be very specific about it, how to go about it. Mostly what we do is we perform a retrograde and then decide that what should be done, but it should be decided when we take the decision for PCNL.
There is a new technique, digital tomosynthesis, which requires a series of projection during single sweep of the X-ray tube over a limited angle, may provide enhanced detection of radio-opaque stones with much less radiation exposure. It's significantly higher sensitivity over plain KUV, 66% versus 24%, with the largest gain in the sensitivity for stones 2 into 5 millimeter in size.
Cost effectiveness of this digital tomosynthesis.
Whenever a new technology comes, it is of course expensive, but it reduces with time. The main problem is not cost in a case like this, because you have to think about radiation as well, that how much radiation you are giving to the patient. Operatively, using that flora as well, you put your feet and दिखाओ वो जी continuous चल रहा है सारा. That is exposure to all the healthcare providers as well as the patient. So you have to think about radiation as well, that how much radiation you are getting if a new modality is being performed, and how much stone can that modality pick. That CT scan can pick every stone 1 centimeter, 2 centimeter. Below that, it fails to pick it up. So you have to think about these 2-3 things and then perform that thing.
This is the logarithm for stone evaluation and follow-up. Stone episode, in the first stone episode occurred, then evaluate with history, physical examination, labs, and imaging and stone analysis. If the patient developed recurrent or interested for the first time stone former or having risk factors, then comprehensive metabolic evaluation, that is 224-hour urine collection. If the patient is low risk, then advise empiric dietary guidelines and no follow-up needed. If the patient has recurrent stones and after the comprehensive metabolic evaluation, advise directed dietary and pharmacological intervention according to the 24-hour urine collection report, and repeat this 24-hour urine collection 3 to 6 months after initiation of treatment. And post-treatment 24-hour urine collection, perform it yearly. If there is no change or no new abnormality, the patient is not forming new stones, then perform 24-hour urine collection yearly and follow-up imaging every 1 to 2 years. If they have developed this stone and you found a new abnormality in metabolic evaluation, then reevaluate the treatment plan, compliance in setting of continued stone growth, and more urgent imaging as per needed of the symptoms.
Are you getting this slide? सबको समझ में आ गई क्या करना है इसके अंदर? How to proceed? Everyone is sleeping? Good. Any comments over it, Nazish? How can we change our system on this logarithm? Mic de Nazish ko. What are we doing and what we are not doing over here?
Sir, we don't usually perform the 24-hour. We don't. So we should perform in adults also. And yes, we have a dietary guidelines in our clinic, in our stone clinic, for which we always give the guidelines to the patients that what should they add in their diet and what should they don't. So more measurements should be taken towards that point.
We don't do 20. We usually don't do 20. Usually don't do 24-hour metabolic studies, and this is also due to high burden rate. But still, we don't chase the stone analysis after PCNL. So patient comes in OPD with after PCNL and he is following for 1 year or 6 months, and still no one is bothered to chase the stone analysis and give him some dietary advices. So if you are doing some procedure and you still have the facility for the stone analysis, which is also gold standard, and to see the stones, what stone is, and you can then guide the patient about the dietary habits also.
So why why we don't do that? You know the reason why we don't do that? We don't do that because we are not following up the patient properly. After how long that stone analysis will come? Anybody else?
6 weeks.
6 weeks. 4 weeks the stone analysis will come, they evaluate. So approximately 6 weeks. So what we do is, we first follow up is after 7 days. Next clinic, yesterday PCNL is done, next day he's standing in the clinic. I don't know why. He shouldn't be at that clinic at that time. Yes, you want to remove the nephrostomy, you want to remove the stitches, you call the patient to the clinic. Otherwise, you ask them to follow up after 4 to 6 weeks that the stone analysis is ready. And when he comes to that clinic, then his stone analysis should be evaluated, and proper diagnosis and treatment should be started, because that PCNL URS is not the treatment. We have to evaluate that why that stone formed, which type of stone that is, and how to treat it and stop that recurrence, because there is a lot of chance of recurrence. So follow up is very important. You have to follow the patient properly rather than filling that DC card and calling him in the next clinic. He's standing the next day. We don't know why he's standing there, but he's standing over there. He says that I've been discharged and I've been asked to come to the clinic. So that follow-up should be proper. So we need to make guidelines of follow-up as well for every patient, that a proper follow-up should be done, which is very neglected everywhere, not only over here, everywhere. So when to follow which patient should also be done. And if that patient follow-ups after 6 weeks and you see that the PCNL has been performed, then that analysis can be changed. I see a lot of papers that surgery is being done 1 week back, next week follow-up, the patient comes, stone analysis awaited, then he comes up again next week, stone analysis awaited. So that patient, if he comes to the clinic, he should be followed after 6 weeks. And a proper dietitian should see that patient, stone analysis should be seen, and if needed, if he is a high risk stone former and our cost effectiveness restraints as well, then we can get his metabolic study done. That cannot be done in every patient because of the developing world perspective. Manzoor sir, sir, you would like to comment? Sir, come on.
I agree with Dr. Harris that every patient is not a candidate for this metabolic study because it's not cost effective, and it should be reserved for high risk patients, and it should be directed after stone analysis. It's very important. And also I would like to stress one point here is that after ESWL we don't direct the patient to collect the fragments. And most 99% they lose,
Yes.
at least 90% they lose the fragment. So those who are posted in ESWL, they must direct the patient that they should collect the stone fragments. And the best way is to macurate or urinate in a sleeve, chai ki chalni jo hoti, yeah, in a bottle, so that the fragments can be collected. So I think this is very important, and our future metabolic abnormalities analysis should be directed according to the stone composition. For example, in cystine stones, there's no need for doing calcium metabolism or uric acid metabolism. And for the uric acid stones, it's not necessary to do the cystine, for example. So this can be social. This could be economically feasible, and so I think
that should be also implemented.
Implemented, yeah.
This is the review article which I have presented, published in 2018 Asian Journal of Urology. Now now we'll discuss the metabolic conditions. First, hypercalciuria. Hypercalciuria is the most common metabolic contributor to kidney stone disease, and there is no exact level at which the amount of calcium in the urine becomes pathologic. Rather than the higher the degree of hypercalciuria, higher the associated risk of calcium stone formation. A level of greater than 200 mg per day has been recommended based on the epidemiological studies, suggesting that over this level, the relative risk for stone formation among both men and women becomes greater than 1.
मैं एक चीज इस पे कर दूं, ये जो हमारी पॉपुलेशन में हाइपरकैल्सी commonest abnormality, but it's a hyperoxaluria and hypocytruria. So in Western studies they show that hypercalciuria is the commonest 24-hour urinary finding in stone formers, but in our population it's not that common. It's about 20%. So this one should be kept in mind that some stone formers may not have hypercalciuria. And in our patient, hyperoxaluria is the main source.
And hypocytruria.
So we should focus on these two. Sometimes patient in our clinic we see hypocalciuria, low urinary.
Yes, we have also. Yeah. Sir, what is your experience regarding primary hyperparathyroidism? I guess we have seen, I have seen 2 to 3 cases of that. What's your experience, sir?
I think it's जो reported incidence है वो 5% है ना, 5 to 10. हाँ? 20% कुछ में है. Reported incidence in stone patient is 5%, but I think it is more than that, and we must have a high index of suspicion in those patients who have got.
Yeah. That is why we were focusing on that serum calcium and uric acid as a baseline investigation for
those who have got bruchite stones. Right?
Calcium phosphate.
Bruchite stones are calcium
Phosphate.
They are also a high index of suspicion for hyperparathyroidism. And other symptoms like bone pains and psychological and sometimes renal failure. It hereditary females more common. So if there is a high index of suspicion, then we can pick up more cases, and this can be accurate for any stone if you find out.
That should be done.
माइक ले लें आप प्लीज.
जो हमारे हम लोग जो करवा भी रहे हैं वो फास्टिंग में नहीं करवा रहे. पैराथायराइड जन शुड बी डन इन 8 to 10 आवर, मतलब जो रिक्वायर्ड फास्टिंग उसमें हो, बिकॉज कैल्शियम और मेटाबॉलिज्म उसमें.
Resorptive hypercalciuria, primary hyperparathyroidism. Primary hyperparathyroidism is one of the most common modifiable causes of hypercalciuria in stone formers with an incidence between 2 to 8%. Primary hyperthyroidism suffer from an overproduction of PTH from either one dominant adenoma or diffuse hyperplasia of all 4 glands. PTH increases the bone turnover and intestinal reabsorption, thereby causing hypercalcemia and hypercalciuria. Primary hyperparathyroidism should be suspected in patients with hypercalcemia, high percentage of calcium phosphate in stone composition, and high urinary calcium level. There are some medication like thiazide, diuretics, lithium that can cause transient increase in PTH level, so one should care before the measurement of PTH. And even dietary calcium cause transient elevations in the serum calcium level. Therefore, a fasting serum calcium level is preferred. Hypercalciuria used to be distinguished into the 3 broad categories: absorptive, renal, and idiopathic. Absorptive hypercalciuria, urinary calcium levels are elevated as a result of increased calcium absorption by the GI tract. In renal hypercalciuria, the calcium wasted through the nephron, proximal convoluted tubule, and it causes it is characterized by hypocalcemia, to the loss of calcium in the urine, and increased hypercalciuria. Idiopathic hypercalciuria, patient who have a high urinary calcium level and no identifiable disease that may contributing are referred to as having idiopathic hypercalciuria. The role of calcium supplements in the hypercalciuria: administration of exogenous calcium and vitamin D supplements have been found to correlate with higher urinary calcium level, but the overall effect this may have on a stone formation remains unclear. The most recent EU guidelines on medical management of a stone recommend that if a patient with known history of calcium stone is on or interested in taking calcium supplement, he or she should limit the calcium intake to 1000 to 1200 mg per day and should be advised to perform 24-hour urine testing on and off the supplements. Conservative strategies for hypercalciuria. Sodium and hypercalciuria. Dietary sodium increases the urinary calcium level because sodium and calcium share a common transport mechanism in the renal tubule. High sodium intake will result in decreased proximal sodium reabsorption and reduced distal renal tubular calcium reabsorption. The end result is hypernatriuria and hypercalciuria, which are risk factors that contribute to the calcium nephrolithiasis. Epidemiologic studies have shown an independent association of dietary sodium consumption with kidney stone formation, particularly in women. Beyond the risk for stone formation, the adverse effects of high sodium intake and hypercalciuria include decreased bone mineral density and bone loss.
कि जो वो है प्रिपरेशन है वो कैल्शियम सिट्रेट है, ठीक है। तो अगर कैल्शियम देना है और स्टोन की हिस्ट्री है तो उनको आप एडवाइस करेंगे कैल्शियम सिट्रेट लें और विथ मील्स लें। विदाउट मील्स जो है वो इट इंक्रीजेज द रिस्क ऑफ स्टोन फॉर्मेशन।
When et al. Investigated the effect of low sodium diet on idiopathic hypercalciuria and calcium oxalate stone formers, and they found that the reduction in calcium and oxalate reduction in urinary calcium to 271 versus 361 mg per day and oxalate 28 versus 32 mg per day compared with the control group. In addition, a low sodium diet corrected the idiopathic hypercalciuria in approximately 30% of patients. When combined with animal protein restriction diet and moderate calcium ingestion, reduced sodium diet decreased stone episode by roughly 50%. A recommended target for patient with calcium stone is sodium consumption of less than or equal to 100 mg MEQ per day. Now the medical therapy for hypercalciuria. Thiazide and thiazide-like diuretics. Thiazide diuretics are preferred medical agent for hypercalciuria. Mechanism of action. Thiazide directly.
कितनी स्लाइड्स रहती हैं?
Mechanism of action of thiazide. Thiazide directly stimulate calcium resorption in the distal nephron while promoting excretion of sodium. And the Ringer et al. Identified 90% decrease in predicted rates of stone formation for patient on chlorthalidone relative to the placebo or magnesium hydrochloride. Potassium loss from the thiazide therapy can cause hypocytriuria as a result of hypokalemia with intracellular acidosis. Therefore, the potassium supplement should be considered in either form of this potassium citrate or potassium chloride, and the potassium level should be monitored within 1 to 2 weeks after initiation of therapy. Hypocytriuria. Hypocytriuria is considered one of the more common metabolic diagnoses, probably second only to hypercalciuria. Citrate is an inhibitor of crystal aggregation. Citrate is an effective inhibitor of calcium oxalate stone formation in the form of as it forms the soluble complexes with the calcium and affects the crystal nucleation and growth. Parson को find the normal urine citrate is normal urine citrate greater than 450 mg in men and women greater than 550 mg daily. Hypocytriuria may be a reflection of systemic disease.
हारिस ये देखो स्लाइड।
जी सर।
ये जो है ना ये हमारे यहाँ जो नॉर्मल वैल्यूज़ हैं फॉर सिट्रेट वो लेस देन 100 है। हाइपोसिट्रेचुरा की जो डेफिनेशन है इन आवर सेटअप, लेकिन जितने भी और पेपर्स हैं जैसे इसने बताया एक
400 अबव जो है वो अपना,
हाँ 450 से कम हो और फीमेल में 550 से कम हो तो फिर इसको हाइपोसिट्रेचुरा लेबल करना चाहिए। आई थिंक वी शुड डिस्कस विद दिस द लेबोरेटरी पीपल
दैट व्हाट इज आवर पेशेंट्स।
हाँ कि हमारा जो है वो लेस देन 100 है हाइपोसिट्रेचुरा की डेफिनेशन, लेकिन इसमें तो 450 इन मैन और 550 इन फीमेल है, तो ये बहुत ज़्यादा डिस्क्रिपेंसी है ना। तो हो सकता है कि फिर अगर ये हम नॉर्मल वैल्यूज लेते हैं तो फिर तो हमारे तकरीबन पॉपुलेशन सारी की सारी जो है वो है हाइपोसिट्रेचुरिक है, इवन नॉर्मल पीपल।
We'll discuss with the lab people and yeah.
Hypercituria may be a reflection of systemic disease, that is renal tubular acidosis, chronic diarrhea, can occur because of the medical therapy, thiazide, and urinary tract infection. In many instances, hypercituria is an idiopathic process. Citrus juices, predominantly lemonade and orange juice, and glomine used as an adjunct to water, provide an increased urinary volume and increased urinary citrate excretion. Several
studies को आगे कर लें फिर आगे आ जाएं.
Concluded.
For kidney stone prevention, absolute amount of fluid consumed per day is more important than the type of the fluid. Stone formers should be encouraged to drink at least 3,000 liters per day and to maintain a urine output of greater than 2,500 milliliter per day. Medical therapy of hypercituria include idiopathic hypercituric calcium nephrolithiasis. In this, hypercituria can occur alone or in conjunction with other abnormalities, hypercalciuria or hyperuricosuria. And stones formed in this condition composed of calcium oxalate, calcium phosphate, or combination of two. Treatment of hypercituria is typically accomplished by citrate repletion. That can be achieved by potassium citrate. The dose of the potassium citrate is half MEq per kg per day, divided in divided doses until the urinary pH is sufficiently alkaline, 6 to 6.5. Currently, EU guidelines recommend the clinician offer potassium citrate to patients with recurrent stone formation and low urinary citrate. Common side effects include GI upset and hyperkalemia. Distal renal tubular acidosis type 1. The hallmark of this disease is low urinary citrate, hypercituria with the inappropriate high urinary pH. Often measured 24-hour urine show hypercituria, high urine pH 6.5 or above, and hypokalemia and hypochloremia on serum studies. Up to the 7% of adults with distal hernia have kidney stones with an early onset and severe form of the disease that cause the nephrocalcinosis and eventual renal insufficiency. Cause of acquired renal tubular acidosis, obstructive recurrent pyelonephritis, analgesia, nephropathy, renal transplantation, and primary hyperthyroidism. Alkali supplementation, such as potassium citrate, typically in the form of potassium citrate, the cornerstone of the therapy in renal tubular acidosis, it is able to correct the metabolic acidosis and hypokalemia found in the disease. Now, the hyperoxaluria. Hyperoxaluria is one of the more common metabolic abnormality, and there is no the set level above which the stone risk can suddenly occur. Deficiency of bacterium found within the intestinal flora, Oxalobacter formigens, is thought to be a factor in formation of calcium oxalate calculi. Enteric hyperoxaluria. Enteric hyperoxaluria used to describe elevation in urinary oxalate level greater than 40 mg per day that was caused by GI malabsorption and diarrhea. Malabsorption mainly lead to the increased oxalate reabsorption and a result of saponification of oral calcium with poorly absorbed fats in GI tract. That can also increase the stone risk via dehydration, hypokalemia, bicarbonate loss, and hypocituria. There are three types of primary hyperoxaluria. The type 1 is the most common variant caused by the aniline glycoxylate aminotransferase, and type 2 caused by the D-glycerate.
Okay. So you can read these things on that PPT we'll send you, and if anybody has got any query, they can ask us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.